2, 1. Hey, everybody. It's so good to have you with us today on our birthday, most joyous of days. To Write Love in Our Arms is now 15. And as a special treat, we wanted to have a conversation with some of the most tenured voices in the organization's history. Here we have with us Chris Youngblood and Jamie Twerkowski. Say hi, guys. Where are you calling in from?
Hello, I'm in Nashville right now, and always.
I am in Indialantic, Florida, a few miles from Mr. Chad Moses.
And that's me, Mr. Chad Moses. So good to see you guys. And, the hope of this day is to really kind of celebrate what 15 years has looked like. And as we were going back through the yearbooks, through the scrapbooks, through our memories, we figured that you two would probably be our most reliable guides. The guy that started it all and the first ever intern for the organization, the first ever voice behind the screen to communicate to the masses. This is really just such an honor to have us all back in one place like the good old days. But let's start in the oldest of those days. Jamie, for the people that are maybe not totally familiar with us or not sure how they got a hold of this podcast or this video cast, could you give us a brief oral history of To Write Love in Our Arms and how it got started?
I would love to. So it was 15 years ago. I believe I met Renee Yohe, who was a new friend in late February of 2006. And she was denied entry into a local treatment center and ended up spending the next 5 days with my friends and I at the house that I was renting a room at in Orlando. And I was really moved by the conversations that we had, staying up late 5 nights in a row, talking about sobriety, talking about her life, her story, healing, really heavy things she had been through, the hope for change, the hope for sobriety. And somewhere in the middle of that time, just asked her what she thought about the possibility of telling her story. I was moved by these conversations, and I wondered if other people could be moved and encouraged by Renee's story, by even part of Renee's story, and would have understood if she said no. And instead, she seemed to love the idea. She used a phrase that we've repeated for years, which is that she loved the idea that maybe there could be a purpose for her pain, for all of the hard stuff that she had lived through, that maybe good could come from it. And specifically that maybe another individual could end up getting help, another family could be encouraged to love someone among them who was struggling. And after 5 days, she checked in to treatment, and I sat down and wrote a 2.5-page story based on the experience that we had just lived, and kept coming back to a phrase that I wrote in that initial story, which was to write love on her arms. And the night I met Renee, after I met her, she, I think, was feeling very conflicted and ended up taking a razor blade to her left forearm and using that blade to write the word fuck up. And so to write love on her arms was very much a goal. And it went back to that really awful, painful moment. And it was the idea of believing better for her, believing that maybe she had bought into a lot of lies and a lot of pain, and hoping that she could believe that she was loved and that she was deserving of love and deserving of good things, deserving of the chance to start over. And 2006 was the moment of MySpace. It was the beginning of social media. Obviously, we're not on MySpace these days, but that was kind of the beginning of it becoming mainstream, becoming part of everyday life, especially for young people back then. And so it was kind of surprising timing where I was hearing about this thing happening on the internet. My friends were signing up for it, and I wondered if that could be a way to give the story a home. And then last but not least, had the idea to maybe do more than tell a story. And so wondered if I could print and sell some t-shirts that said to write love on her arms, and do that to do more than encourage and inspire, but also to specifically help pay for Renee's treatment. We knew that her family didn't have much money. She didn't have any money. And so I wondered if a t-shirt could be a fundraiser, and if we could maybe sell 100 over the course of, a month or two in Central Florida. And that was our surprising beginning.
I've heard that story now literally thousands of times. I've been able to repeat it thousands of times. And every time I kind of get hung up on not really the irony, but really the magic of this began as effectively a charity case. This was trying not to change the statistics about suicide or addiction or depression or self-injury, but it was trying to meet the needs of an individual. Like ideally, you could work yourself out of a business by helping one person, but it grew pretty quickly from people saying, look, this isn't just about Renee, but this relates to me, my family, my friends. And I guess to that point, Chris, do you remember the first time that you heard about To Write Love in Our Arms? What was it about the movement, the story, or maybe the t-shirts that really caught your interest?
Yeah, it's such a funny memory for me because I didn't actually own a computer like in my teens, so it was any chance I actually got to use somebody else's computer, I would jump on it. And my baby niece was being born, and so I was staying over at my brother's house, and everybody was at the hospital, I jumped on and I started messing around with my MySpace page, and through, I mean, even to this day, music is so wrapped up in Try Love and Arm story. And for me, I started seeing a few bands that I was following. Try Love and Arms would be in their top 8. And so finding my way to their page that night when, I just like have the house to myself, I have the computer to myself, and I'm just kind of house sitting at that point. And coming across the original story, and then everything else that all the other blog posts that were posted on MySpace at the time, they resonated with me in a way that that finally gave a voice to a lot of things that I never had words for. I grew up surrounded by addiction. It wasn't something that I had struggled with directly, but I saw how it affected so many people in my life. I was affected by people who died by suicide, and I saw the way that depression had essentially infiltrated and affected the people who, were even tasked with raising me. And I never really knew how to process that. I didn't even know that I had the ability to process that. And so reading about what Try Love in Our Arms was doing, and the story of Renee, and just this idea that we can actually talk about these things and that there is a way to talk about them was just something that was really meaningful to me. And it was the first time that I had ever been introduced to anything like that. And so that's what really made me gravitate towards the organization, beyond that initial oh, I'm going to click this profile because I see it everywhere right now.
And, oh, sorry, my light went out. And that had to be pretty early on, right? Like we're talking, is it as far back as 2006, or was this, a year later? I guess what I'm going from here is, when did it switch from this is cool, this is something I see on MySpace, this is giving me some context on how to relate to people in my life and lives around me, to, hey, I think this is something that I could really get behind. This could be something that I can help volunteer with or affect some sense of change on my own level.
Yeah, no, that's, I think you both have known me long enough to know that if I get interested in something, I don't really go into it half-hearted. And so for me, I mean, I saw this, I think within the week I had placed my order for t-shirts. I had 3 immediately on the way. And I started just kind of piecing together, how can I actually be a part of this? What can I do from, I'm 10 hours away from where you are in Florida. I have no idea what this looks like, but I would love to be involved. And so through a few different avenues on MySpace, I had attempted to reach out some people who were helping out with the organization at the time. I ended up reaching out to the main Try Love page, and then I ended up reaching out to Jamie as well. And it was just little pieces of hey, here in Georgia, if you ever make your way through, I would love to talk to you, or love to meet up and see, help however I can. And this was back in 2006, when it's towards the end of 2006, and then shortly after spring of '07 was when the Amberlin Cities tour happened, and that's when I met Jamie and a few other people who were working with the organization at the time. And I think the main thing that got me on, I have to imagine that there were thousands of people who were reaching out, but I had sent a photo. Classic Try Love in Our Arms logo has this design behind the words that is, I think, called Stars and Stitches with Rescue as Possible. And I ended up getting that design tattooed on my side, and I sent it in. And I think I've heard Jamie say that was a reality moment of this kid is probably serious. He wants to be involved. Yeah. And so
we have to not let him down.
right. Yeah. So for, I think that there was some, I think that they saw that hey, this kid does believe in what we're doing here. And so, yeah, we met. I mean, the first time that we met was in Atlanta when you guys came through for the Amberlin tour, and all of that truly was just removing me from that one night that I had in my using my brother's computer. All I had was a T-Mobile Sidekick, and so that's how I communicated with anybody that I was trying to actually get involved with this organization. And so I was literally had this in the palm of my hands, and that's all I had was how I could communicate with Jamie. The organization was all through this very archaic device that nobody would care to use.
We'll get to the Sidekick a little bit later.
I forgot about the Sidekick. That brings back memories.
Well, yeah, we'll touch back on the Sidekick in a bit, but Jamie, where Chris is kind of leaving the story off, I'd love for you to take it up. So Renee was able to get into the treatment facility. Shirts were able to be printed. Bands started wearing the shirt, and this started exploding on MySpace. People who had no communication or no context with Renee or the greater Orlando area were starting to reach out to you. Can you talk a little bit about how those first moments of Fireworks really felt? What did it look like to open up the page and see cities from far away start to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild to look back and as the two of just to think how much it's changed and how organized we are and how many systems and people are involved now. And back then there was none of that. There was obviously a time very early on where it was just me having access to this MySpace page. And I always tell people it was a whole range. It was definitely a roller coaster, because part of it was amazing. I think you used the word magic. It was exciting. It was surprising. But then it was also super heavy, and I was in over my head. I didn't have training or experience. I wasn't qualified to answer the questions that people were asking. And so I think there was a tension there of, wow, something's happening. This is amazing, but also feeling overwhelmed. And I think that led me, usually I just talk about the process of learning, of kind of doing the homework, even at a very entry level, to learn what resources might exist, to begin to have something to offer people who were reaching out, whether they were reaching out for help or asking how to help a loved one. And then third would probably be just people simply asking, how can I get involved? How can I be a part of the solution? How can I be part of this conversation? And started to learn about treatment centers, support groups, other websites, books that people were recommending, sort of the impetus for what today is our Find Help tool, just beginning to create a list that we would add to over time, to be able to offer people more than a story, more than an encouraging message, and hope that just like Renee got help in her local community, that other people could do that, and that they could encourage their loved ones who might be struggling to take that step as well.
Yeah, you've mentioned how much has changed, whether it's through staffing or how we respond to messages, the type of information we're able to provide. I mean, clearly, you hope that over 15 years that we'd experience some change. What are some things that feel constant, though? What are some things that are still happening now that feel very familiar from back when this was starting?
Yeah, I love that question, and I feel like I get some form of that question pretty consistently. And I as much as I'm proud of the growth and the changes, the team, the systems, the new campaigns, all the things that we've accomplished and that the team is working on even today, and as we think about the future, I love kind of as your question touched on just how much has remained the same, and specifically, I think that we get to do our best to move people, and specifically to move people from hopelessness to hope, from isolation to connection. We get to communicate. I tell people all the time, I think the biggest thing we do, and it's been true since the beginning, is we communicate. And you especially, but we've all gotten a taste of it. We love to communicate in person, pre-pandemic and hopefully post-pandemic. But thankfully, even during this pandemic, we get to show up online. We use our website, we use our blog, we use social media. 15 years later, the platforms have changed and evolved over time, but we still use these platforms to tell stories, to share resources, to connect people, to encourage people, to share more and more detailed resources, not just on a broad scale, but even specifically, if you live in a small town in Wisconsin, we can now help you find a 12-step meeting. We can help you find a local counselor. So I love that the broad strokes really remain the same, where we're trying to bring hope to people. We're trying to encourage people. And I think probably for all three of us, it never gets old hearing the comment or even the compliment that, hey, I'm still alive because of the work that you guys do, or I'm still alive, and it can be traced back to a card I picked up at a music festival, or as Chris said, this MySpace page I stumbled upon, or I heard you speak at my college or at an Amber Lynn show. And I think we never know, where someone might encounter hope, where someone might encounter some piece of our story. But it's been amazing, I think, for all three of us to see the fruit of that, and to know that not only are there people walking around with tattoos, Chris being one, but there's people that are literally still here, still breathing, and it never gets old hearing that people are still alive, and also that lives have been transformed. That people have benefited from counseling, from honest relationships, from feeling like, as Chris touched on, 15 years ago, realizing they weren't alone, and realizing there was language, and that it was okay to talk about mental health and addiction.
Yeah. So I love that we keep coming back to the term of MySpace, like kind of as a dating tool, not like as a tool to find a date, but as a way to reliably kind of put where this fell on the timeline. I mean, I don't think it's a small thing to note that this was all happening before Facebook was open to the widest audience. This was all happening before Twitter even existed, certainly before for TikTok and how many other platforms we utilize today. But Chris, going back to your first days of working in an official capacity to write Love in Our Arms, like you were the originator on kind of message response. You trained me on how to respond to MySpace messages. And I remember just being daunted when I first logged in that first time. There were 16 interns at the time, and there were tens of thousands of messages that we had to get replying to. What was it like being intern one of one, opening up the computer, opening up the T-Mobile Sidekick for the first time, and seeing this tidal wave of people wanting to relate to what we were doing?
It's a good question. Yeah, it was such a. I remember the feeling when I drove down to Florida, and then I pulled up to our office / my new home, and my bedroom was my office, and it was such a shift for me to make this move. And I remember, like, it didn't feel real when I got the actual like login information for the MySpace page, because it was just like this. Man, I don't even know what it. I don't have a good like illustration of what that even could be like in modern day. But it was just like this like really crazy thing for me. But I logged on, and yeah, there were 16,000 messages in there, and the reality of it, of Jamie and one other person prior to me moving down, was that they were the only ones who were responding to these messages, and they had like, and it was not doable. But in a very like gung ho honeymoon stage, I was willing to take it on as as much as possible. And so from there, like we had another person, Michael, who ended up moving down and helping out. He did Warped Tour for us in what 2007 and 8, and he worked with us like. Yeah, he like he and I just like we worked on he worked on the music side of things, and then we started developing like what does it look like to actually invite people down here to down to Florida to be a part of this. People are wanting to be a part of this, and how can we utilize that to actually let them engage with other people who are reaching out to us, so that we can actually start responding to these people who have reached out to us from everything from, hey, where's my shirt, or to like, hey, I'm actually like, I'm dealing with something right now. And so part of our goal was to actually like respond to every single message, like regardless of how big or small that was. And so what we did was we created some language. We worked with a licensed mental health counselor just to make sure that we weren't like, we were setting those boundaries and we were doing it well. And then we just moved forward with like all the way to the back and started working our way through just getting back to people. If it had, unfortunately, at times it had been like 2 months before they had heard back from us, but we still reached out and we said, hey, like, thank you for sharing. We just wanted to check in, let you know that we read this, and we wanted to see how you're doing. And from that, I can remember so many incredible conversations that are just even if it was just a one-off response of people saying like, you know what, like, I appreciate you guys getting back to me. Honestly, it means a lot that like you would even take the time. I can only imagine how busy you guys were. I'm doing so much better. And that was a pretty consistent theme, just knowing that the work that we were doing online, even if we weren't able to get back to people in the moment, they still found what they needed through the words that we were putting out there. So yeah, it was definitely a lot coming down and like trying to figure out how do we actually deliver, and regardless of what people are wanting from us, like how do we actually show up for them, because they're trusting us. And that's a huge it's a huge responsibility. It's also just a big honor. That was one of the things that I would always remind myself and try to remind other people. Like that is one of the biggest things that's, even if it's a stranger or even if it's your closest friend, like it's just always an honor that like somebody would invite you into that. So yeah, we wanted to do right by the people who were sharing that with us.
Yeah, man. That's such an awesome perspective. And I think that's one thing I take a lot of pride in, is that sense of consistent belief in other people is something that started on day one and is with us 15 years later. Now, Jamie, you often talk about how when this got started, there was no business plan. There was no aspiration to have bands or t-shirts be at the center of all this. And perhaps maybe even no inkling that this would last for more than a couple weeks or a few months or maybe a couple years until Renee kind of got her feet back under her. But at what point did it occur to you that maybe you've stumbled on something much bigger? Maybe this could be, in your words, a movement of sorts.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I felt like I was sort of living this double life because I was a sales rep for Hurley at the time, and when they hired me, I was 22 when they hired me, and that was really my dream job at the time, and I ended up leaving 4 years later to pursue To Write Love. But just, in the months before I left, I was trying to juggle both. I was doing this full-time job that was a really good job that had a lot of responsibility, and then there was this thing that we've been talking about that was starting to happen that was so hard to explain to the average person. You know what I mean? um, but there, and again, it went back to, I think, all of the mixed emotions I was feeling of like, man, something special is happening. It's exciting, it's overwhelming, it's scary. And I think the way I've shared it over the years is I knew that if I quit my Hurley job, someone else would get it. They would step in, they'd be happy, they'd do a good job, it would be a good gig for them. And it seemed like it was up to me whether or not this thing kept going. You know what I mean? In those very early days. But I think just, specifically the messages kept coming in. They were coming in from every state. They were coming in from other countries. There was the momentum that orders for the t-shirts were coming in and sales kept going up, and, just surprising doors kept opening. We kept hearing from more bands that wanted to be involved. The t-shirts kept showing up in more surprising places. And I think so. I was kind of living with the excitement of what was happening, and then just needing to get to that place where I was willing to go all in, like where I was willing to leave my Hurley job. And I remember it was the summer of 2006. So it was a few months into it. And it was clear that what I was passionate about this thing that was happening. It wasn't even an organization yet, but what was To Write Love on Our Arms, whatever it was, had my attention, and it was starting to compromise my sales job. And I just knew it was coming to a crossroads. And, I'm really thankful for the decision that I made, and then just the so many people that have been involved over the years, people that I've been able to learn from, guys like you two that have joined the team and in a way never left. But yeah, it was exciting, and also, just wild in that it was so unpredictable, and I didn't have anything to compare it to, because MySpace was it represented a new frontier. But it just felt, I think, long story short, it just felt too special to walk away from. And it felt like we could do a lot more than just help one person.
Yeah. Do you ever regret coming up with the longest name for an organization ever?
It's funny, man. I think at this point we're all so used to it, but I do step back now and then and just go, man, what an unusual name, and how surprising that this thing with an unusual name was allowed to succeed. And then, we've all experienced the conversation or kind of the moment when someone is just so curious because it's an unusual name. And so that sort of goes back to that magical meant to be feeling where it's a mouthful. It's an unusual name for a story. It's certainly an unusual name for a 501c3. But we've all seen how that has benefited the organization, and it's invited people to be curious. And, you guys, no one's done it more than Chad, but Chris and I have experienced it as well. When you're standing underneath a tent at a music festival, and the tent has the words To Write Love on Our Arms, and people just walk up like, what is this? What does this mean? And we could have spelled it out. We could have had a really straightforward title, but I'm thankful that it didn't go that way.
Right on. This question may not make the final edit, but I'm curious. This is something I've never thought to ask before. When this started outgrowing the Renee story, the Renee narrative, do you recall who the first financial beneficiary of To Write Love on Our Arms activity was? Do you remember the first entity or organization that we were able to invest in because of this original Renee story that then became a story that we've all lent our voice to?
Man, I don't. Chris, the Chris Youngblood Foundation.
I was about to say it was me. It was actually just to move. It was to pay for my trash bags.
Your trash bag's full of clothes. I love it. Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot there, man. Just didn't know.
That's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't be like I don't. There's one that comes to mind because it was challenging. And then Hope Line comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that relationship with Reese.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron and Michelle come to mind as like probably the first local folks that we worked with. You know, that was pre-Solace, obviously. Yeah. But no, that's a really good question.
Cool. So Chris,
that's the Instagram clip.
That's it. That's all the world ever really needed to know. And Jamie, the initial MySpace, was it myspace.com/to write love on her arms, or did we shorten it to TWLOHA from the get-go?
It was all the letters. It was to write love on her arms. Yeah,
I would
all the
take
words.
up the entire search bar. That's amazing. So, Chris, going back in time, we joked very briefly about the T-Mobile sidekick. Can we just pay homage to that device? And can you elaborate on what was so special about that device to the history of To Write Love on Our Arms?
I mean, gosh, if you want to talk, I mean, there are so many butterfly effect things here, but I mean, like it truly was
literally like it would whip open like a butterfly.
Yeah. Yes. I think, I mean, it was truly my only way to communicate with Jamie and the team and the organization before I joined up. And so when I think about like, I didn't have enough money to buy a computer. So it was like, this is all I had. And so it allowed me to stay in touch and, right from palm of my hand. And so like that, like I got teased about it so much, just like in general of just like having it as like a 20-something-year-old person. But
they were really popular, right?
Yeah, for they were. But I think one thing that a lot of people forget is that besides Blackberries, they were like the only mass-produced web-ready phone device.
Right. Yeah.
And they were so cool. As someone who never had one, I still remember when people would open it and I thought it was so cool.
Well, I feel like y'all are trying to make me feel better right now.
No. Like, I mean, I remember being in the van with you and you would be like reformatting our MySpace page and maybe even our website at points on the T-Mobile sidekick. It wasn't just how you're talking to Jamie. It wasn't just how you're talking to staff members. It was how the rest of the world was able to stay up to date with To Write Love on Her Arms. Like, I think that's amazing.
Oh yeah, it's an insane thought now. Like just knowing like how far technology has come in the past 15 years, with like seeing the high quality content that gets uploaded now versus the unbelievably blurry content that I was trying to post from my sidekick on behalf of this organization that was reaching millions of people made no sense. Like that's not an effective like business model. I think marketers across the world would be like, this is the worst idea ever. But at the time, it was all uncharted territory. And so for us, we gave insight into like being in these, taking our message to so many places. So as low res as so many photos were and all the typos in between, like, man, it did serve its place. I wish we could, I do actually believe I have it floating around my house right now in a box somewhere.
I haven't thought about this in years, but I do remember you being so incredibly fast on it. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but I feel like I remember you being so fast. I
Yeah, it
also
was a
think too,
thing.
like if we were at a festival, there were times like something, say like Cornerstone, we were all at Cornerstone. Like there was no
Yeah.
team back, you know what I mean? Like there was no like home base. Like we were all there and all we had was our phones, whatever those were at the time.
Well, let's rest there. Jamie, what was your first device, your first lens to the internet that fit in your hand? What was your first device to help drive the organization forward?
Oh man, I honestly don't remember. Like I really don't. I didn't even have, I had a BlackBerry.
I was about to say you had your BlackBerry for a bit,
You
and
were the
then
last
Yeah,
convert to Team iPhone on staff.
I think so. Yeah. But I wasn't, I also was like late to the BlackBerry thing. I feel like I was just, yeah, nothing exciting or special. Um, I don't know. I feel like we had Apple, I feel like we had Mac laptops pretty early on, like I remember having that for years now. But yeah, I was late to the BlackBerry party and then late to the um, iPhone party. The other thing I remember is, and I think we joked about this last night when we were texting, but like I was all in on MySpace. Like I wanted to believe MySpace would just live forever. And I think it was Chris that was smart enough to start putting everything on our MySpace onto this new thing called Facebook. And I just couldn't, we had all of our success, all of our reach was tied to MySpace. And I just didn't even want to think about the possibility that people would eventually move on, or other people would be somewhere else. And I really think it was Chris that started to focus on this new Facebook thing. And obviously over time there's been so many other platforms, but that's something I was thinking about earlier.
He's a
oh, it was.
visionary.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I don't know about that, but I would say it was absolutely pulling teeth to get you to like say like, okay, like yeah, you can put this over here, like that's fine. I was like, thank you, thank you, and I think it eventually worked to our benefit, like in several ways.
I think so. Yeah, I remember when I first started working for Try Love, I had a Motorola flip phone. Like I was still texting with T9. That there was no keyboard. I just had to hit the same button several times until like the right word showed up. And then
You also had a you also had a faux hawk at the time, so
I did, but we're talking about technology at the moment.
I'm talking about questionable decisions across the board.
Fair. Well, I just found another questionable decision. So my
Wait,
first,
what's the thing that made our hair straight? That's
oh yeah, flat
technology.
iron.
Yeah, I think we were all a part of that.
We were all part of the Flatiron Club. Um, yeah, so I remember it was right after my internship. I decided, look, like this Motorola is not gonna get it done for me, and I ended up buying an iPhone. My first iPhone was a 3GS, and I just found it the other day, and I made my own skin for
Yes.
for it. I
Ooh.
don't even know if I should probably be, oh, the light's getting in the way, but I
I
got a
see it.
sticker the size of my iPhone
That is
3GS.
awesome.
It still turns on. It's I just found the charger for it the other day. Anyway,
That is
that
cool.
that made me laugh, and I bet the rest of our podcast audience is laughing as well. Um, we're three old guys. Yeah. So I guess to kick it back to to Jamie or Chris, whoever wants to speak up. What are some memories that are easiest to recall? What pops up in your brain when I say like, top to write love memory? It could be lighthearted. It could be something that's heartfelt. But what are some memories over the past 15 years that are brightest in your mind?
Chris, you can go first.
I'm feeling
The more
sentimental,
specific, the
and
better.
sure. Side, this might not make it. Because like the first thing that came to my mind was um, Jamie and I and one other person, we had gone to Australia for Soundwave Festival, and thinking I was sharing some photos last night on our text thread, um, and I was just, I remember like so specific. There are smells that like will still hit me from that trip of like being at the festival grounds and talking to people. This was my first time I'd done Warped Tour. I traveled around the country, like all North America, at this point, talking to people, and now I'm on the other side of the world, and I'm speaking with people who speak my same language but sound a little bit different, and it's all, and just seeing how far that message resonated, and knowing the impact of some, as we've been talking about, something as small as like a MySpace post grew into this thing that reached the other side of the world. And I remember driving, Jamie and I were driving along the coast in Perth, and it was just this very surreal feeling. We had finished up with the last festival day, and we look over, which probably isn't the best, like, got to keep eyes on the road kind of thing. But you look over and we see dolphins jumping out of the waves, like as they're breaking. And man, like it's a moment that I think about and I cherish so much, because it was just like this, like it was this collective, like, man, like you went from like your the bed that you like slept in since you were a kid in Georgia to all the way around the world in a couple of years. And like you've taken this, like I got to take this message along with me, and so I think so much about that first trip. I got to go back, several other times, and not much else. When I think about Try It Love, not much else beats that moment, and thinking about, like going to put my feet in the Indian Ocean. Like that was just a really incredible moment for me.
I was looking for that specific phrase too. I love, I mean, I've heard you tell this story so many times, but the dipping your toes in the Indian Ocean, like that's always the take home. Now, that was 2008? Does that sound right? 2009. Yeah, man.
I totally remember, man. I remember that trip. I remember that day, that drive. Like, it's cool because sometimes someone remembers something and you kind of forget, but it's cool that I feel like I remember that vividly as well. And also just the sense of like wonder and honor. I think we were the only charity on the tour. Does that sound right? Like, which is just baffling. Yeah. This American charity that had come out of nowhere, and we're literally, it's not like we were one of 30 or 10, like we get to do the whole tour and we're the only charity component. Like it was just, there were so many things like that where it was just amazing, the doors that would open. And yeah, I think I'm with you. I imagine for Chad, it's similar, where there's so much travel, so many trips, so many events that come to mind. And also just the shared life, like the fact that Chris and I got to be there together, and memories of being at Cornerstone in the early days with whoever made up the team at the time. Yeah, man, just it's neat because I think we've obviously, the focus tonight, a lot of this is technology, and we're using technology to have this conversation. But I think it's cool that for all three of us, there's such an emphasis and appreciation for those offline moments, those face-to-face moments. And again, no one's had more than Chad over the years, those moments that we really look forward to getting back to.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's cool. I love it when the stories collide, when you both can say, yeah, that's my favorite too. That keeps the questions way shorter. So very efficient of y'all. Yeah. So taking it back to conversation, to storytelling, to technology, in terms of, that sense of communication and connection, what do you think has been the most consistent piece? Or maybe it's easier to point out what's changed the most besides platforms. But Chris, I'll kick it to you first. What do you think has changed the most in how we tell our story organizationally, or maybe just even as a society these days, since you began this journey 15 years ago?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the world of social media was, it feels like it was a weird purity. I don't know if purity might be the best word there, but like early on, it really
Like
was. Like
innocence.
innocence is such a better word. There was such an innocence around um, social media and like trying to figure out. I mean, think about like one of the biggest like news stories at one point was like, can this pickle Facebook page get more likes than a Nickelback song? Like it was the most insane thing. Which even that, like, to potentially younger listeners, like, might sound absolutely ridiculous, but like that's what it was. And so I think about that, and then I think about the the voice that To Write Love has had to grow into in a time of such, I would say, turmoil online. I think that you can find your pockets, and then you can find so many people that disagree with what you believe, and sometimes those voices are louder. And um, I think we're also like coming out of a season where like that was really amplified, and so how did Try Love um, combat so much hostility, whether that was a majority or it was just what was loudest. It still made such an impact. And so how does Try Love actually keep giving this message of hope, you know, 10, 15 years later, through all of that, through how we've all kind of grown up into what the internet has become, what social media has become. And I think one of the things that I love most, still being now on the outside and looking in, is that since day one, like even to now, that message of hope and like being able to, find love and encourage community, like that, all like that consistency has just remained there through no matter what. um and so yeah, if I think about like the greatness of what To Write Love is, it has been that consistency over the last 15 years.
Jamie, as someone that thinks a ton about story, as someone that, this began as a storytelling project, how have you seen social media, technology, and just kind of growing up change the landscape of how we communicate and connect with one another?
No, I love what Chris touched on, where there was an innocence in those early days because it was unknown. Like, today every major brand, probably doesn't just have a social media person, they have a social media team, right? Like everyone is organized, everyone is thinking about these things. I mean, you can study these things in college. And when we started 15 years ago, like we didn't, we kind of felt like pioneers, like there weren't other people, especially in the mental health nonprofit space, that were using these platforms, starting with MySpace. And so it's been wild to grow up in that. And yet, at the same time, I think I'm thankful that it felt like we were introducing the conversation in those early years. We were inviting people, we were even teaching people at time about these issues. And I do feel like there's so much more awareness now. There's still clearly so much work to be done. There's numbers, statistics that are disheartening, but everywhere we look, from within pop culture, athletes, actors, music, there's so many leaders, there's so many people comfortable talking about mental health now. And I think that's been a really cool thing to see the context change. And then for us, I think as an organization, it's just so amazing to see, I think, the volume that we're able to share, like just the amount of, not just content, that's a word that gets used a lot, but the amount of stories that we can tell through our blog, just what a well-oiled machine it feels like now. And obviously we all know there's so many people involved in making that happen, from the blog to this podcast to social media, and not just social media, but even the way we now respond to individuals on social media. So I think it's just there, early days, it's like, all right, if I don't write a blog this week, there's not a blog this week, and now you fast forward and there's so many people contributing their voices. Our friend Becky helping people, refine these blogs, helping edit these blogs. So and really, more than anything, I just love that we're able to provide encouragement and tell so many different stories, again, with that initial goal of moving people.
Yeah. I remember vividly, this was probably back in 2009, going out to lunch with the leader of a global nonprofit, someone that has done it by the book, just part of decades and decades of global service. And sit down with him at lunch and just trying to pick his brain, just learn whatever I can. And he starts the conversation by saying, that y'all do everything wrong. I'm like, well, that's a start of a conversation. I'm like, well, yeah, what do you mean? And it's like, your name is too long and you're funded by t-shirts and no one knows where your office is. You're just based online. Like, what does that even mean? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. And he goes, but it works for you. So don't change it. And, that was really for me kind of a resetting the frame of conversation that we were part of this odd youth movement of nonprofits. Like, you had a bunch of nonprofits that had been around for generations. And then you had Keep Abreast, Invisible Children, us, Charity Water, all popping up within like a handful of years with each other. Like that is so wild. And like you mentioned, Jamie, like there weren't any social media communications degrees to be had. There was no strategy book, to refer to on how to make sure we're making the biggest impact, getting the most impressions. And I mean, I don't even know there's a question in there. It's just 15 years goes by so stinking fast. Yeah, I don't know if you hear a question in there, feel free to respond. But
for some reason, I started thinking about Warped Tour, and when you touched on all these nonprofits being born around the same time, and Chris experienced this more than me, but there was also a really cool camaraderie. Like once we were on each other's radar, and I know you've rubbed shoulders with plenty of charities over the years, but kind of this feeling of cheering each other on, like I think was, and I feel like for me, no place to find that like the nonprofit area of Warped Tour, where, Chris would spend, 2.5 months, like sleeping on buses and waking up in the dark and setting up tents and just living life with representatives of these other organizations. And just thinking about like the friendships that were formed. And then I know for you, traveling on a different circuit, that you have those stories and relationships as well. So it's been, I think, cool to not only do these charities maybe look different that were born in the last, 10 to 15 years, but I think the camaraderie and I don't know, just the shared life that took place even within that space has been really cool to see.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of calendar pages over the past 45 minutes or so. But I think now it's time to flip the page into something new. We've hit on MySpace. We've talked about how Facebook and Twitter and Instagram have become the places that we do a lot of our conversation now. And on our birthday, we decided that we want to give a gift to people. That gift is our brand new app that we call The Hopeful. So it's there for consistent mood tracking, for journaling, for daily encouragements. And when we talk about this language of an app, we kind of by it, but we had phones that were incapable of using apps when this all got started. What does it sound like to you? What does it mean to you? We'll start with Chris, to hear that we now have a new vehicle for storytelling, that an app is now something that exists in the world of To Write Love on Our Arms.
Yeah, I think for as long as I can even remember, we've always had the conversation of, do we need an app? And I think one of the biggest benefits that I always would advocate for would be, it gives you the ability to connect with people where you can put it in their hands versus them having to come to you or like seek it out. And so when I think about what Try Love can do with an app, and it genuinely makes me. It's a very non-exciting statement to say that I am just genuinely excited to hear that, like, this is going to be something that is going to be accessible to so many people to figure out. They're just a small step back is that there are so many meditation and self-help apps out there, but I think that the way that Try Love in Our Arms actually communicates is still unique. And so when I think about giving that voice and giving that the way that Try Love communicates, a new platform that goes directly to people, I think that is. I think the evolution of everything that we've talked about does kind of culminate into like an app being an incredible next step. And so the features that you're even talking about, some of which were even new to me, like it sounds incredible. And so, yeah, like I'm incredibly excited that it's happening.
And to Jamie, did you ever in your wildest dreams, let me start that one over. Jamie, did you ever in your wildest dreams expect to hear this sentence that TWLOHA now has an app?
Well, I think in recent years, as Chris said, it is something we've kicked around, and I like that we took our time. I like that we waited and didn't jump right in. But it's also exciting that we're marking this 15-year milestone with not only looking back, but with celebrating something brand new. And I think as much as there's been a ton of planning that's gone into it, that there's also a curiosity of what it's going to mean to people and how it can continue to evolve. Once we launch it, how can we make it better? How will people use it? But I love that we'll continue to I've always said that we want to show up in the places where people are. And we do that online. We do that on various platforms. We pre and post pandemic love to do that face to face. But I think, as Chris said, this is such an exciting way to connect with people individually in a format that works for them day after day, that for the people who choose to, this can be a consistent part of not only their life, but their mental health, maybe their recovery, that we can continue to bring tools, resources, hope, encouragement, stories to people day after day. And so it's a really exciting next step for the organization.
That's awesome. Well, from the bottom of my heart, speaking on behalf of the rest of the team, thank y'all for your unique fingerprints that are still found on this organization, the unique roles that you filled in the lives of so many people that we've yet to meet, people that we can't wait to meet, that, is made possible through your hard work, through your grit, through your vision, through your miles and hours of making this happen. So from a grateful organization, from a grateful world and universe, thank you guys.
Oh, it's good to be with you guys.
I'll say love it back, you guys.
But... Oh, guys. Yeah, no, we wanted a little bit more silence there.
Do y'all have any questions, any curiosities, or points of conversation that you wish we would have hit on but haven't yet?
I feel like we got a lot.
Yeah.
It was cool. I feel like the technology thread was woven through, but I feel like we got to touch on a bunch of other stuff and travel, relationships, the early days. So I think you did great leading us through.
Yeah, thank you. I do have one more question, and I don't know if this will get plugged back in or not, but what do y'all remember as kind of early mile markers of success? What were some early goals that you remember us having? I know Chris mentioned getting that MySpace count down to 0, getting the message account totally caught up. But what do you remember being just some points that you could cross and say that was a success? We did it. Now on to the next thing.
I remember hearing from Michael Schneider after the first day of Warped Tour. So the first ever day of Warped Tour for us. And I think he had basically sold almost everything. Like he had sold what we thought we would sell the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I remember I was at Cornerstone Festival having this conversation. And so that was a moment of like, oh my gosh, this thing that we just rolled the dice on, this thing that we just took a chance on by sending someone out. Wow, it's happening there too. Like this is working. And honestly, I think in those early years, there weren't, for me, and this might sound strange, but like there weren't a lot of goals because there was so much, it was a sense of keeping up, that like we were just riding this wave, and so consistently these surprising doors would open, where there was just like trying to keep up. Whereas, Chris touched on keeping up with the messages, but just the opportunities, getting invited to conferences and events and retreats, and the people that we got to meet, whether that was formal or informal. And I love the mix of like, there's this MySpace page that anchored us, but we got to begin to travel, and we got to begin to take this conversation and this message on the road. And I know that all three of us are thankful for those, those miles and those places over the years. But I remember, the success on Warped Tour, not knowing how that would go. The success, and then to back up, like Cornerstone, Florida was a festival in Orlando, and someone gave us a free spot. Like I probably wouldn't have gone. This was back when it was simply an attempt to help Renee. And we did so well, not just in sales, but so many bands, our t-shirts were just popping up on stage after stage. And that success allowed us to think about going to the big festival, to Cornerstone in Illinois a couple of months later. And so it was just wild, where just moment after moment, there was just this feeling of, wow, something is happening and this momentum is building. And I do think that gave even me at the time permission to think about, okay, this can keep going. This can be around a year from now. And you touched on it earlier. We've all seen so many things come and go. There was certainly an element of this was a trend. It was cool to wear this t-shirt that first summer. And I was wrestling with, how can this be more than a trend? How can we be here a year from now? And I think for me, coming from Hurley and Quicksilver before that, those are brands that expect to be around a year later and 10 years later. And I think that sort of gave me permission to think in that direction. How can we be a brand that's more than a brand, that's meaningful, that's really bringing value to people? But that was a challenge, because I think a lot of people wouldn't have been surprised if we had a great year and then it went away. And so I think I'm really proud that 15 years later, it's not just still around, but that it's really thriving, that we're doing more than ever, that we have, I think, the biggest team we've ever had, that even during this pandemic, that we're really proud of the way we're able to reach people. And then that the app represents a new way of reaching people.
Yeah, I mean, you honestly took the words out of my mouth there, because the resilience of the organization, I think, was such a big thing of like year after year. Like people kept showing up for us, like not even just at the tent, like people showed up to support us in such unique ways that like I never would have thought, like whether it was a supporter in college or a musician or a celebrity who wanted to do something for us or make a donation to us. And so, yeah, I think that it's so funny that even today I will still get I'll talk about Try Love, and people will be like, oh yeah, like I think I remember those guys. And to be able to talk about, yes, what we did, but like everything that the organization is still doing, and that it exists and that it's thriving and that it's in like more creative ways than ever, like reaching people. So yeah, I do think back to how many times like I heard, the whole trend conversation. It's something that we wrestled with so much early on. Was just like, how do we navigate this? And luckily, like we just kind of just kept showing up and doing, like, wanting to talk about these things, and people kept listening and wanting to join in with us. And yeah, that was. I don't have like one specific moment of like that big thing, but like you're spot on. Like that was just like such a huge thing that we had some resiliency in there of like continuing on through some times when like other organizations didn't really. And so yeah.
Chris, first to write love shirt you ever owned?
Classic. Oh no, you know what? It wasn't classic black. I bought a white one, and then I bought the would it be defined as the Indian Rescue? The yellow one.
Yeah. The bright
we called
yellow
it Rescue.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember what language it was.
It was Hindi.
Yeah,
Hindi. Okay,
it said Rescue in Hindi.
Yeah. So there was that, and then I ordered a black Dion.
Yes,
because I was a very tiny person at the time.
What are two sizes bigger, folks? 2 sizes bigger.
So yeah, that was my first order that came in.
All right, so Jamie, you've had them all, but what's been your favorite throwback shirt?
As he was talking, I was thinking about the Alive shirt. That one's always had a special place in my heart. I remember James Likeness, who's our art director, who's been with us since the early days. I remember him putting that together and sending it over, and I think right away just having a sense that it was something special. And I love that one. We've brought it back at least once over time, but I don't know, that one has I love that one.
I have such a vivid memory. So when he sent that over, you and I had taken a trip up to Ponte Vedra, Florida, and stayed at the hotel that your sister was working at. And I remember it coming in and like just being like, it was such again, like that was such an early thing for me where I was just like, there were still like really like cool, like exciting new things that I'd never really been exposed to. And I remember that coming through and being like, wow, like I'm getting to see this new design, like, take shape.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a funny thing.
And it's funny, but like, if our first t-shirt was like a hit song. And so then the challenge became, okay, well, can we have other hit songs? And so there was so much pressure on each new design. And we were so small that, logically it's not like we were dropping a new collection. It's like, so that would have been one of the first ones. And I remember that feeling of like, man, is this going to work? Are people going to like this one?
At the same time, there was like kind of a collection sense. Like it was title, but you had, like 7 different colors.
Yeah.
Movement was on a couple different colors. I remember one wild movement. It was a white shirt with purple lettering. I think that was 2009. Like just wild stuff. But I just found
a hot topic.
I just found my first To Write Love on Her Arm shirt.
Oh, the Paramore one.
The Paramore edition.
Paramore title. That's awesome.
So, and this is held up well. I tell you what, American Apparel could make a mean shirt back in the day. Yeah, that's fun.
Totally.
Any other quick hits, parting shots?
I was thinking, we were talking about technology and we focused a lot on social media, but I was just thinking about, especially in probably the last 5 years, just what an amazing job our team has done with fundraising, just with that piece, which has taken, we love selling t-shirts. We love what a t-shirt can mean. We love the conversations, but I think that allowed us to go to a different level as an organization. It allowed us to be healthier. It took pressure off the merchandise sales, and it just gave people a way to support us, to be involved. Everything from, people donating their birthdays on Facebook to now these annual campaigns, which don't just allow people to raise money, but allow people to tell their story. You think about the 5K that's coming up, at the Run For It 5K, and people get to share why it's personal for them and why they want to participate. So I think, I think about Lindsay and Kat and just the folks that have done such a good job of using technology beyond just our social media. And not only that, but certainly it relates to social media. How can we use these platforms to invite people to participate? And, we know we've heard from so many people over the years that need help, but we've also thankfully heard from so many people that simply want to get involved. How can I help? How can I support what you're doing? And I love that there are more ways than ever to answer that question. There are more ways than ever to get involved.
I love you bring that up. Like, I think that's such a cool thing about the fundraisers, the campaigns, but especially like the social media fundraisers. Like you mentioned, the Donate Your Birthday fundraisers. And I'll talk to people on the road all the time. They're like, hey, I raised money for you for my birthday. Didn't quite hit my goal. And I'm like, that's cool. Like the money is cool. But what's even cooler is you, like you said, Jamie, like tying your existence to something else, kind of grounding your life into the lives of other people. And whether you hit your dollar amount or not, what's really cool is that Aunt Linda, who you maybe not have seen in person for 8 years, this is popping up on her feed. And you don't know if that's the one day that she really needed to see a bit of encouragement or needed to learn about resources that were nearby. So it really is like, while the fundraising is unique and certainly a great way to keep the lights on and keep the mission going, it's just one more way to connect more people to more people. So yeah, thanks for bringing that part up.
No, I love that. It also made me think there's been so many times in recent years where collectively we hit our goal. And so even these individuals, we see people raise $2,000 and we see people raise $25. And it's so cool to see people rally and come together to allow us to hit these great big goals, right? When sometimes it's $150,000 or it's $200,000, and to know that all of these individuals spread out, not just across the country, but around the world, come together to make that happen is pretty special.
Right on. Chris, last word is yours.
Oh, I don't want that.
Well, you just did. Congratulations.
Oof, thank you. No, it's leave it with Jamie. Nobody wants to hear me for the last word.
I like that the little guy is on Chris's head, depending where he moves.
So good. It's gonna make Mark very, very happy. All right,
dude. It's Mark's birthday tomorrow, and he's gonna be old.
Ooh, like 42.
I think 43, because I'm 41 now. How old are you guys?